Now we have to talk about the diversity in the living world. Because we are dealing with the living world, we have talked about the basic intricacies that form the living world. Now let's take a look into the gross living world, that how it appears to the eye. The observers, as in the case of, now before I get into what is about this diversity, now this particular lesson is going to be from the point of view of the observer, that is in our case, how it is easier for us to identify the different life forms. So we have the diversity in the living world, first that is to be understood firstly. Second is, by the end of this lesson, we have to arrive at the answers of these two questions. First one is, why do we need classification? Second one is, what are the bases of classification? These are the two questions. Here a term classification comes into the scene. We have to see which classification we are talking about. Before that, let us see what is diversity. If I talk about diversity, in the simplest terms, just call it variety. Okay. Now try to relate it with an example that I would give you. You go somewhere, you're looking for something. In case you do online shopping, or you go shopping somewhere, you're looking for some sports equipment. In case you go to a place, you see only 2 or 3 items that are for purchase. So you would say that the variety is limited. But in case you go to some bigger place where you are going to get number of items at your availability, where you can choose any one out of many, a number of them. So you would say that in short, that particular experience, you would say that I could choose out of a great variety. So same is in the case of diversity. You can use both of them as synonyms. When I say that diversity in living world, it is variety, the available variety that would be present in the living world. Now when we talk about the diversity, we are referring to the various types of life forms that we see next to us. Now take the simplest example. See, it is easier for us to learn things. It's just off the track, just an advice to you people, because you might be bored by now by studying these things, because unless you don't find the practical importance of something, you cannot relate to it. So I would suggest you that whatever you learn, just try to relate it in your practical life. Just try to relate whatever you learn in the books with the practical world. So it would be easier for you to understand that whatever lies in the books comes from the practical world only. So if we are talking about diversity, that is present in the practical world. The nature has, with its benevolent behavior, it has bestowed on us so many life forms, so many life forms. Most of you visit the zoological parks, there you see animals, different types of plants. You go to aquariums, you see so many aquatic organisms that are floating inside, and it is such a great sight to observe them, and it gives you an immense sort of pleasure. That is because the living forms have lots and lots of diversity. Now when such a study is to be done, supposedly these living things are to be studied, and such is the diversity that it goes into millions, the count is almost millions, then it would be a great requirement that we need to classify those living organisms into suitable, those classification criterias and suitable categories. I would say there should be classification criterias and the suitable categories, so that it is easier for us to distinguish. Now take the example, simplest example. Supposedly there are many students in your class, or you go to play somewhere, there are many players over there. You have teams over there, alright, or if you play a game, or if you are in a performance, you have a team, you have certain people who are classified according to their talent. Supposedly the talent is the criteria for classification. So it is easier for the one who deals with you as a team, or as people who come to play, it is easier for the person who has to deal with you, so that he can channelize the energy properly, and whatever energy is required and whatever input is required to bring out the best out of you can be put in a better way. Same way, in case there is no classification to this huge diversity, the understanding would be difficult. I would give you another example. Supposedly your textbook that you study, the textbook that you have, all the chapters are kept together. The book starts from the beginning without any context, without any chapter discretion, without any distinguishing effects, that this is the part is physics, this part is chemistry, this part is biology, if that distinguishing effect is not there, if distinguishing effect is not the correct term, if that partition, I would say, okay, if that partition is not made, it is not easy for any student, how much intellectual he or she may be, how much intelligent he or she may be, he cannot keep the things in the mind, he or she, I would say. So in order to make you understand things in a better way, what has been done in your textbook, that those parts have been divided into certain headings. Like supposedly now we have the chapter diversity in living world, which is totally different from the cell, the basic unit of life. Now consider a situation where the study of cell was part of this diversity. It would be very difficult for you to understand. So in order to make our study little bit less complicated, we have put the diversity into basic criterias, and that lies to be the classification. Now you understand why we need classification? We need classification because such is the diversity, it is easier for us to study about the organism, it is easier to decide that this particular organism belongs to that particular criteria where it should go, and the basis lies to be the species, and we have other things which we study later on, but for now we understand that why do we need classification, so that the study is easy, so that it is easier to put the organism in its respective classification taxon. Now what is taxon? I will let you know. Taxon is the category, just simply category. Easier for us to place the particular organism in its respective category so that we can understand and the organism goes in the same category where it belongs to. As in the case, supposedly we are talking about students who are having a height more than 5 feet and 8 inches. So they will belong to the particular category where the height is higher than that. Those which are having a lower height, they would belong to that category. So you see, you take one particular criteria for classification, and that lies to be the basis of classification. A particular criteria which is chosen, okay, the particular criteria would be chosen for classification, and that criteria would be the basis which would put the diversity in different categories. So why we need category, why we need classification? So that we can categorize the immense diversity for easier accessibility. What are the bases of classification? That we have to see. Now see, many attempts were made in order to understand the diversity. The first attempt that was being made was Aristotle. Now those who study history, they must have studied that Aristotle was a Greek philosopher. He was basically a philosopher, and he studied in great depth lot many things, especially the living forms, and he was the first one who classified, who made an attempt so that these diverse life forms can be classified. And what he classified the life forms into, and on what basis he did, he classified them into birds and animals. Those which could fly, those had aerial habitat, they were birds. Those which could walk, they were animals, and in animals he had water animals. He called all those which are present in the water as fishes. So you see, it is somewhat vague. Even in listening it is vague, because inside water you just don't find fishes. There would be an octopus, there would be sharks which are not exactly fishes, there would be those different corals. There is so much life form in ocean that you cannot classify all the life forms of ocean into fishes. So his concept was little bit to the point, lot of it was vague, but at least he made an attempt. And later followed many scientists and pioneers who came forward and told us that we study, not told us directly though, we study it, and they gave us basically, they gave us the concept of classification, they gave us the basic criteria on which the classification could be made, and now today we have a highly advanced system of classification. Let's see the chronological details, little bit of them. Aristotle was the first one, then came the second one who gave that then came Carolus Linnaeus. He also gave a system of classification. He was a Swedish doctor, doctor from Sweden. He had written a book, a famous book, that is Systema Naturae, in which he classified the life forms into plants and animals. This was artificial system. We study it in higher classes. This Carolus Linnaeus came. Then came another scientist, that was R.H. Whittaker. Okay. He gave us 5 kingdom classification that we study in subsequent lessons. What was that 5 kingdom classification? But because, as I told you in the beginning, that we have to arrive at the answer of these 2 questions, let's concentrate there more than this. And then came Carl Woos. So while this person, I missed one person's name. He was in between Carolus Linnaeus. It was Ernst Haeckel. Okay, this Ernst Haeckel was around 1893, R.H. Whittaker was around 1969 and Carl Woos was around 1973. This is the approximate period when they came and gave the classification, when they gave their idea of classification, and they changed the concept in the terms of kingdoms, that in the classification units in which the organisms can be put into. So we have these 3 names. Now what are the basis of classification? See, at his time and his time and his time, it was the external characteristics, okay, whatever was visible to the eye. Okay, if it is flying, it would be a bird. If it is in water, it would be an aquatic animal. If it is not moving, it would be a plant. So these were the classifications. He did a lot of work in the field of botany, but what you have to keep in mind is that these 3 people, they were giving more importance to external morphology. As we talked about the example of height of people in your class, or the 5 feet 9 inches, I gave you the example. Same way we were taking external morphology into consideration. In case of these 3 people, it was the external looks, whatever was looking to the outside. But we have studied that the fundamental unit of life is cell, which is not visible to the eye. So why not take that into consideration? So he was the person who took into account cytological evidences that because life is being operated at the cellular level, it should be observed at the cellular level that what characteristics are responsible for a particular behavior. And when we talk about cytological evidences, we take into account the presence of cell wall. Supposedly cell wall is present, it would be a plant, cellulosic cell wall. Then he took into account whether it is present or it is absent, okay. And if it is present, what type of cell wall it is going to be. Next he took into account, the first thing was whether the cell is prokaryotic or eukaryotic. I am not citing the criterias according to the importance which they hold. I am just giving you randomly. Importance is, first one is this, then comes the cell wall. Then on the basis of nutrition, whether they are autotrophic or they are heterotrophic, okay. Then on the basis of their nutrition has been taken into account, prokaryotic, eukaryotic has been taken into account, cell wall has been taken into account. That is all. That is all. You can just confine yourself into this, that whether the cell happens to be prokaryotic or eukaryotic, if it is having a cell wall or not, what is the mode of nutrition that is going to be present inside them in the various types of organisms. On these basis, the classification was being made. Now, this person, the last one that we have mentioned, that is Carl Woos, he also took cytological evidences along with the study, but by his time, there was another field that had made its advent in the field of diversity understanding, that is classification, and it was evolution, evolutionary studies. Now you see, time has come where whatever study is done in the field of biology has to make some or other relevance in terms of evolution. Now what is evolution? How we have evolved from the simplest life form to the most complex life form of human beings. We do talk about that our ancestors were monkeys, okay? We talk that we have evolved from apes. We have evolved from apes, that means apes were primitive in the beginning, then certain changes came in the body, then we became intelligent, we increased our cerebral cortex, we developed the speech ability. So those were the changes, those were the evolutions. And I need not to tell you that life originated from the most simplest forms. Now those most simplest form, how they became the complex life forms of today, that is under the study of evolution. And it has been established that evolutionary studies are very important for understanding which organism is to be classified where, okay, because there has been a relation that has been established between certain species on the basis of evolution. So there was another criteria, that was evolutionary studies, which was taken into account for the basis of classification. So we come to the end of the lesson. As I promised, we are going to come to the answers of these two. We got the answer to this one, and now we have answer to this one as well, that what was the criteria, what was the basis of classification. First were external morphology. Later on in the 20th century, from the external morphology, the human race moved forward. They took cytological evidences into account, they took evolutionary studies into account, and gave us the 5 kingdom classification. And this person, you must remember, gave us the 3 domains of life. So when we have gained enough knowledge about these, next we shift to this 5 kingdom classification. We are going to understand what R.H. Whittaker had told in the 5 kingdom classification. So we have arrived to the answers of these, and with this we are going to end the lesson.